Tonight, we are very pleased to have Cheri Chastain, Sustainability Manager at CSU Chico, who will speak with us on the topic Climate Action and Resilience Planning at Chico State, Charting a Path to 2030. Cheri has her BA in Environmental Geography from Sacramento State University and her master's degree in geography from Chico State. Apparently a lifelong learner, she is now working on a second master's degree in political science at Chico State. Prior to her work at the university, she worked for 12 years as sustainability manager at Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, where her work included advocacy for climate and energy policy at the state and federal levels, education and training of employees, and working on operational efficiency improvements. And one of her current roles is as chair of the Chico Climate Action Commission. We are delighted to have you share with us this evening, Cheri. First, some minimal housekeeping details. Tonight's lecture, while virtual, is totally live, so you will not have to go to another site as we have done for the prior two lectures, which were pre-recorded. We will ask you, or actually we've already muted your audio during and after the lecture, and to write any questions you have for our speaker in the chat column. These questions will be presented to Cheri at the end of her presentation during the Q&A session. So now, take it away, Cheri.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marcia. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm good. I hope everybody can see that. And thank you all for being here this evening. I'm going to talk about climate action and resilience planning at Chico State, give you a little bit of background on where we've been and some more information about where we are headed. And then I'll conclude with some ways that you can get involved. There are many ways for you to get involved, should you so choose. So I'll go ahead and start with the commitment that Chico State has made. And you all can still see my screen, correct? Okay. So Chico State has made what we call the climate commitment. And the climate commitment is actually a twofold commitment. The climate commitment consists of one commitment to carbon, and this is our carbon neutrality commitment. There's a second commitment for resilience. So campuses can choose an individual carbon commitment or they can choose a resilience commitment. If they choose both, they can choose what's called the climate commitment. Chico State was a founding signatory of the American Colleges and Universities Presidential Climate Commitment in 2007. So this is a longstanding commitment that the university has had. We're gaining a bit more steam in the last couple of years and actually making some progress in meeting the goals that we have committed to. And I'm going to take a moment and pause here and just remind you that if you have questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat as you have them. And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end, or you can save your questions to the end. If you don't want to forget them, go ahead and plop them in the chat there. And we have Mike Guzzi on the call here, who is my boss. So if I get stumped, I'll just kick it his direction. Okay, back to Chico State. So we've made this climate commitment, which includes the carbon commitment and this resilience commitment. What does this carbon commitment mean? We have committed to be carbon neutral for scopes 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. It's a very short 10 years away from now. Scope 1 emissions are basically anything that the university controls, owns, and operates. And that's primarily stationary combustion of natural gas in our boilers, our hot water heaters, diesel in our backup generators. It's mobile combustion in our fleet of vehicles, so the campus vehicles, and then agricultural emissions, which include fertilizer applications and the livestock that we have at the university farm. Scope 2 emissions are the emissions associated with the generation, transmission, and delivery of the purchased electricity that campus is procuring. So all that energy that we are procuring, emissions are associated in that process at every step until it gets to our campus. Traditionally, most campuses set a really aggressive goal for scope 1 and 2 emissions with a later date for scope 3 emissions, because scope 3 is really, really tough. Scope 3 are things that contribute to campus operations, but that are out of our direct control. For example, students, faculty, and staff commuting to and from our campus. which happens to be the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions for our campus. Scope 3 also includes our sponsored travel, so our faculty and staff who take a research trip or who attend a conference or who attend an industry meeting. Emissions associated with that travel are lumped in there. And then our solid waste to landfill, as well as our wastewater generation, all contribute to our greenhouse gas inventory. So there are other sources of greenhouse gas emissions associated with Chico State's operations, but they have historically not been counted or quantified as part of our greenhouse gas inventory. And I'll speak a little bit about that a little bit later in the presentation. So that's on the carbon side. On the resilience side, what does that mean? Now, resilience can mean anything to anybody, and I think everybody has their own personal definition of what resilience means. It could be mental resilience or physical resilience or economic resilience. There's lots of different directions that you can take this word. And so we have adopted Second Nature's definition of resilience, which is the ability to survive disruption and to anticipate, adapt, and flourish in the face of change. Now, Second Nature is the organization that we report our greenhouse gas emissions to. It is the organization that oversees all of the campus climate commitments, which is why we've adopted their definition of resilience for purposes of planning on our campus. So here's a little snapshot of what our greenhouse gas emissions currently look like. You'll see here at the bottom, Scope 1, this next color is Scope 2, and then this top bit is Scope 3. What's very disappointing, I think, for myself and Mike as well, is that Scope 1 and 2 are relatively flat. This means that we're not making the investments in our own campus. This means that we're not doing as much as we should with our own physical infrastructure, addressing behavior, engaging in education and awareness. And so we're gonna do a lot, and I'll talk about that. We're gonna do a lot in these Scope 1 and 2 areas to kind of step up our game a little bit. Scope 3, as I mentioned, is a really tricky one because it's things that are out of our control, which makes it really, really difficult to quantify. So as we're getting data, it's imperfect data. It's not perfect world data, which leaves a lot of holes and gaps. And so we're going to work to try to fill some of those holes and gaps over the coming years so that we have more robust and strong data. But overall, we are seeing a significant decline in our greenhouse gas emissions from our 1990 baseline. But we have a long way to go to get to neutral, right? We still have more than 20,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent that we need to somehow eliminate or offset. We did have a climate action plan that was written and adopted in 2011, and that was the most recent climate action plan. I'm in the process right now of updating our climate action plan, and I expect to have that out and hopefully approved amongst the campus community by the end of the year is our target for that. We should start to see that circulating in smaller groups for review and input in the next couple of weeks. But these are some of the initial recommendations that were included as part of the initial climate action plan in 2011. I put check marks next to the ones that have been completed. There's been some progress on some of the other ones, but not enough to actually check off as complete. I'm not going to read these to you. You can read the whole climate action plan on the website at a later time if you choose. I also wanted to mention that there was no call out for resilience against climate change in the initial climate action plan. So in 2018, the city of Chico adopted a climate change vulnerability assessment. And the assessment was done by a Civic Spark fellow, and the fellow evaluated using a tool called CalAdapt to look at what is the city of Chico going to look like in the coming years as the climate continues to change. In that report, it identified increasing average temperatures and changes in annual precipitation as two key factors that we're going to face with our climate here in Chico. What those are going to lead to are specifically increased frequency, intensity, and duration of heat days and waves, increased flooding, increased wildfires, and decreased snowpack and water supplies, which we've all intimately felt over the last several years, right? From this, though, there's a lot more that needs to be considered when you're talking about resilience. So these are the things that we need to prepare for. But these things can also lead to impacts on our physical utilities and infrastructure, our food systems and food security, our vulnerable populations, public health. How are we going to have safe streets and transportation, exit routes, right? There's a lot more that needs to be considered as the climate continues to change and impact us here in Chico, but globally at the same time. So we've all felt this, right? We've felt all of these impacts already. We had a severe drought from 2013 that eased up in 2017. We're in the middle of another drought at the moment. We had incredible rains that led to the Oroville Dam spillway emergency, which I'm not going to rehash all of these things for you. We also had the car fire, which was incredibly devastating. Right on the heels of that, the Camp Fire, which was even more devastating, followed by another supercell downpour that I know Ghazi had a lot of fun cleaning up after, millions of dollars of damage on our campus alone, followed by public safety power shutoffs, right, as the utilities continue to experience potential wildfire risk associated with their infrastructure with high winds, low humidity, like we've been experiencing again intimately. Oh, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. This pandemic is changing the way that we're thinking about everything. It's changing how we're doing everything. It's also impacting the most vulnerable populations the most, those that have the most exposure to pollution, those that are the most impacted by climate change already are hardest hit by this pandemic. And then most of Northern California is still on fire. You know, the effects of climate change are real. They're happening in real time. They're devastating. They're causing destruction for communities across the world, but especially here in Northern California. So in a nutshell, the human world is kind of a mess right now. We'll just get that out. It's devastating. I think it's causing a lot of anxiety. It's causing a lot of angst, but there are solutions and there are actions that we can take. This does not have to be an incredibly depressing exercise. So we're going to shift now away from the devastation and talk about some of the opportunities for action. So at Chico State, if you were not aware, our president released her strategic plan about a year ago. Within the strategic plan, there are 3 key strategic priorities: equity, diversity, and inclusion, civic and global engagement, resilient and sustainable systems. Following those are the enduring commitments, which are our academic distinction, our transformative student experience, our prominent scholarship and innovation, and a culture of excellence and accountability. So what the president did, she announced this plan, and then she identified teams of leads on campus to lead teams for each one of these strategic priorities. So Ghazi and I are part of the team leading the resilient and sustainable systems. We're also leading that with Megan Kurtz out of the president's office and Eli Goodsell, the executive director of the reserves. So we have these teams. From there, the teams were tasked with developing campus-wide goals. And so for our goal of carbon neutrality, we have a couple goals here. So on the sustainability side, one, we're going to get this climate action plan done. So I'm working really hard to get that climate action plan out there. This is going to be our roadmap for achieving carbon neutrality. This is going to be very tactical. This is going to put a lot of emphasis on scope 1 and 2, a lot of emphasis on investment needed on campus to make the changes to really draw down our emissions. From there, we're going to work on quantifying the amount of carbon sequestered in campus soils. So we're going to measure the amount of carbon sequestered in campus proper. We're going to measure the university farm, and we're going to measure the reserves. We're going to measure all different soil types. And then we're going to work on a plan to optimize the amount of carbon that we're sequestering in our soils. So we have our climate action plan, very tactical investments to draw down emissions generation. And then we're going to quantify sequestration and work on improving the amount of carbon that we can sequester on our campus soils. But we are an institution of higher education. So coming back to our mission and our roots of education, we're going to restructure the current Green Leaf course designation. The green leaf currently designates broad sustainability focused courses within the course catalog. So a student can easily identify a sustainability focused course. We're going to restructure that so that it focuses on climate change. So we've narrowed down the student learning outcomes. There's a team of faculty and staff that are working on this. So we're gonna refocus this effort on climate change, and then we're gonna work on making sure that every student who graduates from our institution has taken at least one green leaf course as part of their education at Chico State. So this is on the climate and the sustainability side. On the resilience side, we're going to increase the integration of resiliency into research and academic practice, and we're going to do this through faculty engagement workshops. We're going to increase our ability to respond to these natural disasters that continue to hit us by making sure that at least 10% of Chico State students have some sort of CPR, first aid, healing center engagement, or trauma-informed care. We're going to develop a strategy for educational continuity, which the pandemic really forced us into, but we have some ideas on how to further improve the services that we offer our students in times of this incredible disruption. And then we're going to improve our coordination with local municipalities on emergency planning and response. And then we're also going to create a resiliency collaborative. And this collaborative will be a space that people can come together to learn from one another, to be inspired by one another, to share information and resources with one another, to really build a resilient region. So facilitating a conversation and resource and information sharing within the North State. So as I mentioned, the Climate Action Plan is being updated. So I'm working on this right now. We're in kind of the final stages of just kind of getting some last numbers around goals, making sure that we've got our numbers really solidified there. So I'll give you a sneak peek of what we're looking at within the Climate Action Plan. First of all, we did contract with faculty member Marie Patterson to write a strategic energy master plan. The strategic energy master plan is a deep dive into specifically natural gas and electricity. And she's done a deep dive on our existing usage and where we stand right now, but also recommendations on how to lower or hopefully neutralize emissions from natural gas and electricity specifically. So that's, in the Climate Action Plan, we're kind of addressing some of these things at a very high level. And then the Strategic Energy Master Plan will be that deeper dive into those specific areas. But within Scope 1, we're talking about what we're calling waning the steam, which is essentially eliminating or reducing the demand that we're placing on our natural gas-fired boilers, the brand new shiny pieces of equipment that we're just invested in. We're gonna try to wean ourselves off of those over the next 10 years. Looking at better metering, Mike Guzzi and I have put forward a zero Scope 1 procurement policy, which requires no more natural gas appliances moving forward. So if a water heater needs to be replaced, we're going to look for an electric option, basically. And that procurement policy applies to not just natural gas combusting equipment like water heaters, but it also applies to vehicles and yard equipment. So lawnmowers, leaf blowers, because everybody loves the super loud gas guzzling leaf blowers. Sidetrack. So we're going to electrify our vehicle fleets. We're looking at backup battery power systems that will hopefully create more resilience with future power disruptions, but also help us store renewable energy, which we're going to hopefully increase. We're actually in the process right now of adding more solar to campus. We're adding solar to obviously the new physical science building, but we're also adding some solar to the BMU, to the rec center, and we're going to finish out that solar array at the top of parking structure too. We're also going to look at net zero energy construction and major renovations. We're going to look at improving space utilization, so we don't have to run an entire building for, say, one classroom or one office. We're going to look at virtual server migration, and then addressing behaviors, right? We can make all the financial investments that we can afford, but if the users are not using the systems appropriately or doing their part, it's kind of a wasted effort. So we're going to put a lot of energy into education and awareness. Scope 3, as I mentioned, is the hardest one because this really gets at people's habits and they don't like to change their habits. So, Scope 3, looking at, we've obviously been forced into telecommuting. I've been working from home since March. Most of us have, which has a huge impact on our greenhouse gas emissions. We're going to look at some incentive programs, but at the same time, we're going to work on improving the infrastructure for alternative transportation. So I hear repeatedly that bike theft and vandalism is a huge barrier for people to riding their bikes to campus. So we're going to look at some secure bike parking. We're going to do some more education around how to register your bike and then report theft and vandalism, but also how to lock your bike. I've seen some really creative ways to not at all lock your bike to a bike rack on campus. So we're going to do some education there. Doing things like working with BCAG to really promote the services and the safety features. I hear a lot of people talk about safety, and I heard that each B-Line bus has like more than 5 security cameras on each bus, and I don't think anybody knows that. So putting some of these features out there that will hopefully break down the barriers that people have to alternative transportation. But also looking at potentially restricting parking permit sales based on geography. So if you live within a mile of campus, maybe we're not going to sell you a parking permit. We still need to dig a little more into that data and see what impact that truly has. But then maybe restricting first-year students from bringing a car to campus. Maybe they're not allowed to bring a car to Chico, or maybe they have to park it at a remote lot. And if they need to go grocery shopping, they can take a shuttle or something to get to their car. And then, of course, improving composting and our zero waste efforts to help reduce the Scope 3 emissions associated with landfill contributions. And the composting is going to be a critical piece in improving our carbon content of our soil. That's some of the work that we're doing right now with faculty member Garrett Lyle, is to measure the carbon content of the soil over time as we include compost applications as part of our landscaping practices. And then again, kind of bring it back to resilience. So, Second Nature has some strategies to pick from. And so we've picked these 4 strategies based on the climate change vulnerability assessment that was done for the city of Chico. So recognizing these are the things that we have to prepare for. So we're going to work on improving our stormwater management. We're going to improve our ecosystem management, improving pollinator habitats, increasing native and drought tolerant landscaping, that kind of thing. We're going to work with the Center for Regenerative Agriculture and Resilient Systems on food security and building a more robust and resilient food distribution and storage system. And then increasing access to cooling. So developing some sort of plan or strategy around cooling centers or accessibility, hydration stations, but also improving the tree canopy of our campus to hopefully bring that campus temperature down. And don't forget, we're still going to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. We got this, right, Mike? Yes, hoorah, as he would say. The plan also includes some other features, so that it's not just a checklist of things to do to achieve carbon neutrality. We have more responsibility as an institution of higher education. So the plan includes components around expanding the climate commitments in curriculum and education, research, and community outreach. We have a section about offsets and clarifying what qualifies as an offset and what % we will allow as an offset in our neutrality goal. Theoretically, we could buy offsets for 100% of our inventory right now if we had the money. Nobody's got any money right now, but theoretically, we could buy offsets right now. The intent here with this plan is not to excuse necessarily bad behavior by buying offsets, right? We still need to do the work. We have to put in the effort. We have to do our best to get as close to neutral as possible. Should that not be achievable, that chapter puts some limitations around offsets and, like I said, what's allowable, but also some percentage limits on there. And then of course the big one, how are we going to pay for it all? So we've got some ideas on how we can fund some of these recommendations and projects that we're putting forward as part of the plan. So that's the update to the climate action plan and where we're headed and what's included. Like I said, I expect to see that, within the next month or two in a much more public format. It'll be circulating through some smaller groups for initial review over the next couple of weeks. So how can you participate? I'm assuming a lot of you are here in Chico, but even if you're not, there's still ways that you could get involved. If you are in Chico, this is for you. Participate in a campus sustainability committee subcommittee. There are 11 subcommittees as part of the campus sustainability committee that covers everything. I know it's unruly. 11 is crazy. But we have a lot of really passionate, intelligent, productive people that are engaging in all of these subcommittees. We're looking for representation from all corners of campus. We're looking for people who can contribute time, expertise, knowledge, but also some energy and hopefully some ability to actually help us get some of these things done. It can't just be me. It can't just be Mike, right? We need a huge team of people mobilizing collectively if we're going to achieve these goals. So this is a great way to get involved. I'll put in the chat when I'm done a link to that website. It's not updated right now for this coming year, but it's updated with the last year's goals and committee members, so you can see kind of what each one of these committees are working on. We do need participation from our community members. For example, I chair the Alternative Transportation Subcommittee, and I have people from the city of Chico on that. I have people from BCAG on there. I have a local transportation planner on there. So we need folks from the community. If you are a campus member, please consider participating in one of these subcommittees. And again, I'll put the link in the chat as soon as I'm done. And then for a larger community effort, I saw Mark Seaman, I think, was on the call as well here this evening. He also serves on the Climate Action Commission with me. The Climate Action Commission is a relatively newly formed commission within the city of Chico, not quite a year old yet. I think maybe it's 2 years. I don't know, maybe a year. Time is completely warped in this whole COVID situation. At any rate, the city has a Climate Action Commission, and the Climate Action Commission is in the process right now of updating their climate action plan. So it's really good timing that the city is doing it at the same time as campus, because we impact each other so much. So this is a great opportunity for you, the community members, to contribute your thoughts, ideas to the climate action plan. Our next meeting is October 8th, which is just next week. It will be a virtual meeting. There is information on the website on how to join that virtual meeting. At that meeting, I believe we'll be talking about some of the initial measures that have been brought forward by the consultant who's working on this project for the city. But there's also a website, and in the website, at the bottom of the website that I've listed there, the bottom of that website is a survey, or it's just like a feedback box. And so if you have things that you want to make sure are included in the city of Chico, please make sure to fill that in. There's also going to be some community outreach happening over the next month. We've got one specific invite-only workshop with some key stakeholders in the community around electrification. So again, weaning ourselves off of natural gas, and that's happening, I think, within the next week. But then beyond that, over mid-October through November, we should have a lot of community outreach around that. So keep an eye out for that and engage in that process. Add your ideas, add your thoughts, add your feedback. You are part of the city of Chico. This plan should be for you. But again, we need to mobilize collectively as a group if we're going to actually start to move the needle and achieve some of our goals. So with that, there's my contact information. I'll leave that up for a minute if anybody would like to send me an email if you have thoughts afterwards, but I think we'll go ahead and open it up for questions, Marsha.